Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Life with Loverly podcast. You are in for a treat today. I am chatting with my new friend and someone whose account I have followed for a long time, Cleere Reaves, but you likely know her as Cleerely Stated from Instagram. With over 270,000 followers, you have probably seen her recognizable quotes and intentional thoughts shared across Instagram. And today, you're getting a front row seat as we pull back the curtain to Cleere's creativity, vulnerability, and transparency through the highs and lows of life. Cleere is a wife, mom, best-selling author, and content creator. She runs a successful faith-based gift line with a mission to help others see themselves through the eyes of Jesus. And now, guys, when I tell you that Cleere's writing somehow always hits home for me and something that I'm currently walking through, I mean it. Time and time again, she seems to be able to put words to my emotions. But on today's episode, she shared with me that she does not pre-plan her content. She writes it in the morning and posts it the same day, which really blew my mind because it showed me that with what was on her heart to write was the same thing that was on my heart and on that same day. It really touched me when she shared that. As you tune in, you will also hear us cover where Cleere initially found her creativity, the surprising place she creates her graphics, her biggest entrepreneurial struggle, the story of her son being born at 26 weeks, and how to find purpose in every season. You may want to grab a tissue for this one, but in the best way. Here's my conversation with Cleere Reaves. Hi, Cleere. How are you? I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, Brittany, this is like truly, I know it sounds cliche to say an answer to prayer, but I can safely say, probably with a lot of other people, that you have made a strong impact on me and really my family too. So this is really just an honor. I'm excited. I've been very expectant for this conversation.
Yeah, it's so crazy because those same words I can say exactly about you. I feel
Mm,
like your writing and just everything that you put out on Instagram, I feel like I was just telling the girls beforehand, I was like, there's so many times that I see her post on Instagram and I'm like, those words are speaking to my soul. Like, how did
mm.
she know that's what I needed to read today?
Was she with me earlier when I was,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so
That's so the power of
crazy.
the Holy Spirit, though,
Yeah.
because think about like that's your individual situation, right? And then there's mine, and then there's millions of other people, just like you speak to, and the Holy Spirit makes it so individualistic and personal for each person, which is just so cool and so
Yeah.
like Him. So I thank you for saying that. That means a
Yeah.
lot.
Truly. Okay, I want to dive in a little bit in like the past and kind of like
Yeah.
talk to you about where your creativity started. I know you had 3 siblings growing up. Like talk to me about how and when like you started being creative, and have you always had a talent for writing, kind of like your background.
Yeah, that discovery
Yeah.
phase. What's funny is like even last year when I was writing my bio, which do you
Mhm.
hate writing your own bio?
Yes.
Isn't it terrible?
I
I'm like,
know.
somebody else do this for me. Like, I'm so awesome.
I
It's just
know.
like, oh, this is awful. But I still struggle with saying author, speaker, podcaster. Like, I think there's just always with creativity a level of imposter syndrome, and
Mhm.
I think that's just such a tactic of the enemy because if he can stop us before we start, like, well, there you go, his job's done. So I think a lot of it, I guess have always kind of written and not really
Mhm.
been um aware that it was a talent. I think sometimes when things come naturally, we just assume everybody can do it. And
Yep.
so that's kind of, I've always, written poems. I always kind of think in rhymes, which is like a strange, I don't know. I just always have. So I would write like little rhymes growing up and that kind of thing. And then in college, started a blog. But I mean, like, genuinely pretty much was like, this is a virtual diary. This is a
Mhm.
nice place to kind of like tab because I'm really bad at journaling, despite the fact that I sell journals. And that's so bad. I should be better, but I'm not. And so I thought, well, this is an easy way to kind of like document my heart and just it's weird because I think the Lord veils our eyes over the A, possibility of failure, and B, the possibility that, like, what if this speaks to nobody? And I kind of just started.
Mhm.
Probably a lot of, I'm being presumptuous here, but when you started your Instagram, it's like, who's gonna follow? What is this gonna be like? What's this gonna turn into?
Yeah.
And now the connect the dots is like, what? Like, I did not anticipate that.
It's so
So
crazy. I totally agree. I mean, thinking back, like, for me, I was like, if this helps one person, like, then it would
yeah,
be worth it, you know? So I
yeah.
feel like you were thinking the same thing.
Yes. Oh, totally. Which I think everybody assumes that, especially too when you know how hard you've worked for growth.
Mhm.
And then it's like, wow, she just blossomed. And you're like, I have been watering this for a hot minute.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, I grew up with three siblings. And I think, my mom and dad are both creative in different ways. My dad's a builder. So he has such vision, like long term. He can look at something and see what it can be in a way that is like just wild. And my mom, she owned a gift company growing up. So there was always just this level of like a lot of my family is entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And so it was kind of just this mindset like, if you start something and you create something, there's a large potential that somebody might want that something.
Right.
And that, I guess, is a mindset that like is was just kind of built into me, and so, but when it comes to content, so much of what I share has almost been accidental. It's kind of like it was birthed either out of my own need, out of
Mhm.
like a need for someone I know. Um, and then kind of in retrospect, I'm like, oh, okay, Holy Spirit, I see what you were up to. Like, and I think our gifts are for us, but they're for other people,
Right.
And so like we were talking about, I mean, we just have no idea what God is doing on the other end of things. And what we hear is just what's communicated. Like,
Right.
think about when something ministers to you, a lot of times you don't even go to the depths in which it really touched your soul
Mm.
and why, because like we're still trying to figure it out.
Right.
So I think, you know, I just think that's really awesome. I totally got off, off track for what you started. It's really funny because I think everybody's creative, and that sounds really cheesy, but I really believe that.
I
I think
I could
like
agree.
whether, yeah, like even if it's how somebody takes a spreadsheet and like has a genius way of showing it that you can understand it. That is not a creativity that I possess, like that gives me hives thinking about that.
Right.
So I just think, looking back, I guess I always kind of have like written, but even now, like if I read my own devotionals, oh, it's a little cringe. It's hard. It's just hard. It's kind of probably if you see your old outfits that, of
Yes.
course, there's trends, so you
Right.
might be like, really, Brittany?
Yeah, I'm
What
like,
was it?
"Huh, wonder what we were going through then."
Yeah. Yeah. Going through is so funny. I know. And I mean, but so yeah, looking back, and I think that's like if you talk to anybody who has created something or has a platform of any sort, which I think platform is a relative term, I mean,
Mhm.
you all have one to um, just, whoever's in front of us having that impact. But I had no idea what I was doing. Essentially, bottom line, I had no idea I was creative and I was kind of like showing up and the Lord started using it. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, I guess I'm going to do this next thing. And here we are. So
Yeah.
kind of
Okay,
crazy.
so then what, like, got you to the point of writing on Instagram? Like, what was
Yeah.
the motivation that got you posting your words there?
I look back, first off, the graphics are terrible. You can't even hardly see the words. And I always say so many words, and I'm like, clear. I mean, I can't even read that with a microscope. But, you know, I think when I started, um, it was almost like it was just an overflow. Like I was so in need. I started the line with scripture cards.
Mhm.
And I mean at that time, it was 6 years ago. So I feel like Instagram, yes, it was like there, but we were still having like a lot of pixelated images and people really didn't know how to utilize it. And
Right.
there was a level of like curation, yes, but I don't know, it was just different. And so it
Mhm.
didn't feel I didn't really have a plan. I didn't really know who was going to read it. Like in my mind, looking back, to think if somebody could have seen this, I always thought, okay, if somebody sees this and thinks, wow, she is so loud about her faith, or wow, she is so vulnerable about where she's at, or wow, she's really firm on this stance. I thought, okay, you know what? If I play that out and that's my worst case scenario, I'm okay with that, you
Right.
know? So it was kind of like, what do I have to lose? And um, it just felt important. I don't
Yeah.
even know. It was really out of my own need. I was struggling. I was post breakup, a lot of transition and change in my own life. And I just felt like maybe somebody else needed some reminders of stability. And
Yeah.
so that kind of just created a rhythm of showing up and saying a bunch of words and
Yeah.
hoping, somebody else was reading them.
Was it scary? Like, did you get this feeling of like, this feels scary to put this out there? Or were you just like confident in what you were writing?
What's funny is I'm still not confident in what I'm writing. I'm confident in the source that I pull from.
Yes.
And there's a level of like every morning, when everything you see is real time. So I do
Oh, I
nothing
love that.
I don't pre-write content.
Wow.
I like I write most of my graphics on a treadmill. So if they're wrong, it's because I'm like hoping I don't face plant.
Face plant.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So there's a level of authenticity I feel like
Mhm.
that is preserved because of that. And I think when I'm doing it, I will something will come up in my spirit, and I mean, I'm talking about from totally left field. I was not thinking about it. It was not in a song I was listening to, and I'm like, well, that is obviously for someone. And so there's a level of like showing up,
Mhm.
and um, and I have committed to the raw. So I think
Yeah.
um there is a level of vulnerability there, and I think, like I said, like the Lord has veiled my eyes over sometimes people's perception that could be like so not in agreement, because I struggle a lot with people pleasing.
Mhm.
And I think the older I get, the more I'm like, you know what? Um, at the end of the day, like when anything hard happens, when our backs are up against the wall, when we're struggling, even as a country, I mean, even as a unified whole, what does everybody do? It's like, oh my gosh, will you pray for me? Oh my
Right.
gosh, can I talk to you about this? Okay, well, I just need to know like if God is with me. And if that's where we're hitting like bottom line, then I feel comfortable letting that be my everyday jargon.
Yeah.
Like even if someone doesn't realize it hits, the word is active. And so I know the Holy Spirit can totally water and my hands aren't touching it, which is the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I mean, usually like a lot of times I'm writing in the mornings and I'll want to write one thing because it'll feel like, oh, well, that sounds a fluid. That sounds
Mhm.
like it works. And the Lord's like, nope, we're talking about this. So it's funny. It's taken on its own life, but I
Yeah.
feel like you probably can resonate with this as so much of my audience has kind of shown me, hey, this is what resonates with me.
Mhm.
This is what I need. And learning to speak to that in unique ways that I think, the strategic part of my brain really has to think through like, there's a short amount of time. People are scrolling, people are
Right.
busy, people are really overwhelmed. And a lot of times people don't want to identify with what they're struggling with. So there has to be a level of gentleness.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's Jesus. I mean, he's humble and gentle at heart, right? Like
Right.
that's the only time he talks about himself in scripture, he says, I am humble and gentle. Like two very strong words. So
Mhm.
to me, I'm like, well, if I enter and I have a heart of integrity and I'm doing my best to be humble and gentle and deliver truth, well, that it'll take care of itself.
Yeah.
So I don't know
I
if
love
that
that
makes sense.
confidence though, because it is coming from a true source. I love
Yes.
that you just
Yeah.
said that because at the end of the day, like with craziness that is going on, like that you are pulling from truth with your words and people are going to read them and they're going to touch lives. I mean, and it's so amazing to hear that all of what you write is like in the real time
Yeah.
because have been so many times I should go through my phone and look at how many saved,
Oh,
clearly
that's so cool.
stated Instagram posts I have, but
Yeah.
it's like there have been so many times where I will scroll and I'm like, whoa, like this, like Jesus needed me to hear this right now. And to
Yeah,
know that like you wrote it the same time I was really struggling with that. And I know
right.
this is applicable to like several other people who follow you. It's just like, that is so wild. Like that is like God, you
Well,
know?
like, to me, how much does he love you? That he would say, "Hey, you got a lot going on, but I'm gonna give your brain a minute,
Mm-hmm.
and I need you to recenter." You know? I mean, to be honest, I was gonna tell you this, Brittany, is like, I feel like to what I do is so much easier than what you do because my publisher's like, "Yeah, if you would share more of the personal side." I'm like, "Oh, hard stop. I don't know." It's so I don't know the boundary line there. And I think
Yeah.
it's hard because what I can like the question I ask myself every single day and something I'm very a heart check that I have to be careful for is that I'm not curating a life of faith without actually living one because that's very easy to do. And you can
Mm-hmm.
learn the language. You can honestly become good at it. I mean, that's all throughout the Bible. And so I don't ever want to be so engrossed in a bubble I'm creating that I'm unaware of what God's actually doing.
Right.
And so that's like something where it's kind of like I started to wonder, okay, well, I want to share more personal understanding that line. And then I just was like, Lord, I feel like I'm confusing like what is authentic and for people who are following, like, where is I don't know. I'm so
Yeah.
impressed by I feel like you hold that balance so well where you preserve what's sacred, but
Yeah.
you still allow people in, you
It's
know?
hard. It's definitely been something even lately that we've just been kind of, how much personal do we really want to share, and to like respect the privacy of like my
Yeah.
family or my friends, or and at the end of the day, like, I started my blog to share outfits and
Yeah.
like, but I feel like there was this time where you really had to share more about you so people could like trust you, that they were
Yes.
relating to you. And so I don't know, I think that's kind of like when the podcast spawned. I was like, I can be super personal and like people could really know my heart and I can
Yeah.
explain things. But then Loverly Gray can stay like outfits, I
Yes.
mean, it's
Yes.
definitely a balance, but
I think it's so
yeah.
true though, because even when following, I mean, I'm a consumer, I'm a clicker, I'm a swipe upper, okay? And I'm thinking like, I feel like she understands my struggles. I feel like she is walking through, like, I know there's not this perfect, like, Sims character, right? That just gets itself
Right.
dressed and their hair stays in place if a tornado comes. Like, I can't vibe
Right.
with that. I'm like, I am half the time, looking like s- not the best, And so that's why it's so funny. I was like, this is video. I was like, Clear, you must shower when you get up. This is
That's so
really
funny.
important to remember. Um,
Well, it's
but I,
interesting too because I think there's so much like, I want to be a positive person. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to get on and be like, "Oh, my kids are going crazy this morning and it was so hard." And, cuz like my version of hard might be like somebody else's like version of easy,
yeah,
and it's like
so
that's
true.
not even what we're really here to talk about.
Yeah,
And I feel like I just am more of a positive person anyway, so like
yeah.
it that it's just a hard balance
But,
sometimes.
like, I think that's so hard because I feel like even, say, when we were in the hospital, that's something I would
Yeah.
continually, like, struggle with is clear you can still feel like your situation is heavy and around you be surrounded by things that are so much more traumatic,
Mhm.
but in such a relative sense, right? Like, I always say, if our bag is full, our bag is full.
Mhm.
So, when we put it on our shoulders, it's still heavy,
Right.
Like, it does not take away from that weight. But I think in the moment, that's hard, especially when we're sharing and people are so generous with
Right.
offering their opinion. Um,
Very generous.
yes, yes, very generous. And, I think a lot of times, like, I mean, if everybody would do like a stop and be like, okay, if Brittany were sitting in front of me and like, would I say this statement? Like, not in a million years,
Right.
And so it's just this weird, like, kind of false courage. Um, developed through a false intimacy. Like
I
in what
know.
mindset did you think that you had the space to speak to? You don't even know her. Like
Right.
what? But I think that's just the weird, and also in retrospect, so it's both sides of the coin. It's so awesome that it creates a level of community and togetherness, and where people can resonate with a post, like you
Right.
said. And I don't know their situation, but God does. And so it's hard, I just think that constant balance, and I just
Mhm.
think we forget our own humanity a lot of times,
Yeah,
and just in the moment. So,
totally. I agree. Um, I would you say is your largest obstacle right now from an entrepreneurial perspective?
oh God, you really want to hear this? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I actually was talking to my someone about this yesterday. I'm pretty good at standing in my own way. Um,
Mm. Mhm.
and like feeling it. And I'm like, hey guys, what do you think I should do? Literally in my brain, like, clear the thing God just told you to do. But I'm going to talk about something else so I can keep my head in the sand, fully aware of what I'm doing. And I'm just like, how long are you going to do this before you just do that thing? Anyway, I'm really bad at doing things like video, showing up, showing my face. I've kind of, it's almost like I've nursed a stronghold for so long that like I'm good at content because I've done it for so like I get up,
Mhm.
it's a muscle I work. I mean, imagine if you did arms every day, like
Right.
you could lift it, right? So I know how to show up in that area. And so I tend to hide behind content. And that's one thing that like I know God wants me to be a little more vulnerable, um, to show up in that way more. And I have continued to not. So there's the
Well,
only
I
answer to
feel
it,
like
you know?
he's gonna continue to nudge you,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
know.
and I think that's really cool though that you have that relationship with him that you're so aware of where he wants you.
Yeah.
Like that
Mhm.
you feel that, that, and then it's just I feel like we're human though. Sometimes we're
Yeah.
like, "You didn't mean that, God." Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you think about that.
I'm like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm on Asana. This is Tuesday. I'm gonna schedule that for next Tuesday. That sounds really good. And then next Tuesday, oh my gosh, I have something. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things too where I know, okay, if I don't strengthen this part of me, I can't reach up and grab that fruit. So there's
Mhm.
a level of containment I know I have right now because I'm not willing to get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, also seeking for like wisdom and how to do that. Um, I think it's so easy, and this is a question I have for you. I know it's your podcast, but I'm
Okay,
gonna ask you.
let's do
Um,
it.
but like, I don't think we even realize how subconsciously we compare. And sometimes
Mm.
I won't even, I try not to scroll a ton just because it's like, you know, oh my gosh, I'm in this world already. And I'll, be 3 hours into it and on cousin's uncle's page dancing at a Thanksgiving. I'm like, what is
How
this?
did I
I don't
get
even know.
here? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to go to bed and say, I have no time.
Right.
So, but like seeing things and then immediately going, wait, should I be doing that? Or, oh gosh, okay, I'm not going to be relevant if I don't show up in this way. Or even with sales, it's like, okay, well, at the end of the day, I love listening to like How I Built This by Guy Raz. I don't know if you've listened to
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yes.
But just hearing all these different businesses, all these different mindsets, different people, those are, this is the world. So knowing the kind of people that operate, whether it's about Orange Theory or Stacy's Pita Chips or how any kind of business was built, it's so interesting when you hear how like dots connected, because I think it just provides creativity and that kind of thing. Um, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I think for me, trying to understand, okay, how can I show up and market and be relevant and talk about products without being a car salesman, without being in your face and just being like, next, I don't want to do
I
something
know.
just to do it. And so doing it with purpose,
Right.
um, you know,
It's
and you do that
funny.
so well though.
Well, I feel like I last year picked a word of the year that was intention
Yeah.
and intentional, and then I really tried to like stay in my lane with that. Like what is
Mm,
intentional for like me? what is
Yeah.
intentional for like my followers to see, and kind of going back to like the comparison or scrolling and being like, I feel like I should be doing that, or they just posted something about that, like, oh, I have that and love that too, like, do I need to get on and share about
Yeah.
that now? Like, there's always like more that you
Uh-huh.
could be doing.
Yeah.
And I really had to figure out, is this serving me or
Mm.
is this like hurting me? You
Yeah.
know, like,
Yeah.
am I going to put 3 hours of time into this that I could be spending with my kids when really like that didn't matter? Like, I
Yeah.
think there's this, it's so easy to get on the internet and just like scroll and be like, oh, I wish I was doing that, or compare your
Mhm.
life or what others are doing. But you really have to be intentional about like removing that
Yeah.
from your mindset and just like blinders up, keep going.
Yeah, and to realize if I hold that, I have to drop something else. I
Right.
mean, it's such a give and take. So it's like, A, do I think I want that, but I don't want the work it takes to get there? Or do
Mhm.
I think I want that because it seems like the rewards are fruitful, but in reality, that's not like sometimes I'll step back and I go, Clear, why did you create Clearly Stated? Are you enslaving yourself to something that
Mhm.
was actually supposed to built to give you more freedom?
Right.
How can we shift that, right? Because that's so not the point, but I think it's crazy how we can just continue to do something because it's our normal, because we
Yeah.
always have. And I think that's so, just doing that self-assessment, stopping long enough to actually go, hold up, how does this look? Do I like it? Is this what I even want?
Right.
God, is this what you want?
Right.
Is there another more beneficial, healthy, like,
Mhm.
I'm like, Clear, what do you want? I want to be a healthy, peaceful person. Like,
Yeah.
how beautiful would that be in this day and age?
I know.
To, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like that's what so many of us want. And like you said, we're just that like clawing for more, you know? And
I know.
Ecclesiastes, is like, hey, I had, you look at Solomon and he had like literally everything, you know? I mean, to an extent where it could not, I mean, the amount of wealth and attainment and, all of that stuff. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm still, I know it's true and I'm still doing this. I'm still exhausting myself. Um, but I want to ask you, like, what do you feel like the Lord's helped you with that word intention? Like, find ways to really stay in your lane and show up differently?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like right now in this season, it's been so overwhelming. And I think
Mm,
I have like heard from God just as like, slow down. Like,
yeah.
and even earlier this year, I said my word of this year was going to be calm. And it feels like it has not been calm yet,
Hmm.
especially coming out of the month of May was like the most stressful month. But there's been things that I feel like as I have been so stressed, I've actually felt like my only option was to like lean on God.
Oh,
So
that's so
it's
good.
like crazy in this season of like worry and overwhelmed that he's just like, hello, I'm here. Like, come to me.
But doesn't
I've,
that make so much sense? Like, you
yeah,
prayed for calm, and what you really were praying was that you were calm, not that your circumstances were, right?
right.
So it's like the disciples in the boat. Like, how else would you know God is peace if the storm wasn't present? So it's like for you,
So true.
you're literally having the furniture spin around you, and you're like, but weirdly, I think I'm okay,
Yeah.
you know, which is so amazing. Like, that's incredible.
It's wild. And I feel like he's lining things up
Yeah.
right now that is just like helping me get into this better state
Yeah.
of just putting him first, because I feel like a
Mm,
lot, I mean, I've been doing this for 6.5 years, and so much of it has just been like, okay, like, I'm just gonna go for this. I think this
yeah.
is what I want to do. And I'm like, hold on, like, what do you want me to do? Like,
Yeah.
let me bring it back a little bit, because of you, I'm able to do all of this. But like, w now where are we going from here? Like, how can
Mm,
we really use, like, my testimony and, like, what is your goal for me here? And I
yeah.
think that question has become, like, a lot more something I'm thinking about. Whereas before I was like, well, I want to do this. I want to do this. Like, this is for me. This is for us.
Yeah.
And like, he was more on the back burner. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like shifting, I think.
Well, and to be mission oriented, I feel like you can have where things can go awry or whatever, but you have vision for,
Mhm.
okay, I'm trying to figure it out. This is a little confusing, or I see one stair, I don't see the next thing. But I know what I've committed to. I know who I'm giving my first to, you
Mhm.
know? And I think there's just a level of reassurance that that
Yeah.
provides, especially when things are really confusing. Or I do feel like right now, Instagram is in a very interesting point,
Mhm.
I almost, and I don't know if this is foolishness, but like don't educate myself always on what's happening, because I feel like then I just become worrisome, or, let me
I
control
agree.
something I literally can't control, you
Right.
know? Um, but I mean, even I feel like you have done so well with also, like we were talking about, in a very saturated
Mhm.
culture and market, being understanding that sometimes saying less is saying more.
Yeah.
Or, you know what, I'm going to be really purposeful in what I say so that when I do say it, there's trust.
Right.
Because if it's just like a megaphone going off at all moments, it's like, oh gosh, okay, that's a lot. I don't know what to digest. I don't know what's serious. I don't know what to trust.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that requires discipline and a level of confidence. Like, okay, Lord, I know you got me. So I'm not going to be so reactive.
Right.
I'm, going to be a little more intentional.
It's
So,
yeah, it's so interesting. It's been like a really cool season to just lean into that, but I feel like with that there's been so many times I've come across words that you've written and it's just like, whoa, like
yeah,
that is so related to what I was feeling this morning, or a
yes.
Bible verse that I had just read, or, the devotion that we were talking about. And I, it's just, I feel like God works in like such, it's crazy to me. And I don't even think we can fully understand like
No.
how big the puzzle is that he is piecing all these things together that are
Yeah.
connecting people that we will never even encounter, but it's just I almost can't even like fathom
No, I don't
it.
think we can.
Right.
I just read that verse the other day, talking about God's sovereignty, and it was talking about how the earth is his footstool and we're like caterpillars. And it's like
Mhm.
you know that, but it's when you get in the airplane, and that's just like from that view, you know.
Right.
And then you think about up there, and what I love about God is the parallel between how aware and acutely important our worries are to him, but yet how big he is,
Mhm.
right? It's like, I care so much about what you're struggling with, and I'm there, and I'm going to speak to it. I'm going to sit with you in it, and I'm going to collect your tears. And I'm going to make sure you're not alone. But also, this is how big I am. This is not hard for me, you know?
Yeah.
And like being reminded of that is such a fatherly, it's
Mhm.
where it's just like, okay, he's sitting with me, he's combing my hair, he's giving me a hug, he's calming me. I'm being reminded, but also in this very same moment, I'm fully confident he's got this. I
Mhm.
just needed to sit here for a second.
Right.
So I just think that's so, it's so like him.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to take this conversation on like a little bit more of a personal note and kind of have our listeners know a little bit more of your backstory, because I feel like
Yeah.
you have married your first boyfriend, which is
Hmm.
so fun. So tell me a little bit about your journey with your husband and how he was
Yes.
your first boyfriend and how all of that came to be.
It is very crazy. I say that if you would have asked me 5 years, no, 6 years ago, like, will you marry Will? I literally would have given you $1 million and been like, I'm good.
No.
we we dated. Also, he was my first boyfriend in high school, my first kiss. And then his best friend got in a car accident, and which he just needed, just emotionally, obviously was going through a lot. We
Yeah.
broke up. I mean, I was so young. I mean, I'm not even sure I could drive. So I was, very, very young,
Yeah.
and very like, I'm very romantically minded, very I forget that. And so I was like, well, in my head, I'm like, I'm probably gonna name our kids, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'm gonna have like 7 more girlfriends. Bye.
Right.
And then we dated all throughout college. And I mean, we had a wonderful relationship, but just some things shifted. And he was figured out his priorities, and we were just, but we needed some space. And so we broke up my senior year. I dated someone else for 4 years and just never anticipated moving back to North Carolina. Or I
Mhm.
knew I was going to probably move back, but just not then.
Mhm.
And never anticipated um, getting back together with Will. But at the same time, it's so crazy because I feel like, how there's just that knowing inside of us. It's kind of like when we ended up in the hospital. Okay, would I have ever written that story? No. Did I ever think I was going to be prepared for that? No.
Mm-mm.
Was I shocked? Not really. Like, I can't really explain, just I felt readied for that. And
Yeah.
so then when Will and I ended up back together, it was kind of humorous because nobody was surprised. We kind of were just always, he was just, we're like best friends.
Mhm.
And so it was very easy with us. And so then we got back together, and I was like, okay, this is either 3 strikes you're out or third time's a charm.
Right.
It's going one way or the other. This could be really good. But we had such an understanding of each
Yeah.
other. And so I think it was kind of like, look, I'm for you. Like, I'm for you irregardless of whether you're with me.
Mhm.
And I think if we can have that mindset, you really can enter into relationships, and they can either develop in a very organic sense, or you can separate and there's not um there's just an understanding.
Yeah.
So, and then we started dating again, and we got married in March of 2019 in Mexico. So
Love
it's
that.
crazy. Yeah.
It's
I mean,
well, and
it's
I feel
wild to
like you
think
guys
about.
probably had to build like, you had this respect for him and
A
he for
respect. That's
you
so true. Yes.
that it was like, "This is what we're doing," and regardless if it goes, like you said, "3rd time's a charm," it worked out, but, like,
Yeah.
at that point, you knew, like, regardless, I'm gonna respect you, so if we can respect
Yes.
and move forward, then, like, here we go.
Yes. Like, I always knew when his name would come up, I'm like, I am so for him. His life has
Yeah,
such big plans. God's got
yeah.
him. Like, I felt, and just like almost like an advocate, like a strong. Yeah, I had such a respect for who he is.
Yeah.
He's very, like, he's an attorney. He's very, we're very different, like polar opposite. If I read something and he reads something, forget about it. It's totally different. I mean, I'm like, what would you read?
You're like, "How did you get that from what
How
I
did you
just
get that?
read?"
Obviously, you're wrong.
Right.
Would you like to sit down? Here. So but I love that so much because, gosh, like my mom always says, you would be flying up in the air and he's the string to your balloon. Like, come on, come back down. And
That's
so, I mean, but he's so gentle, and he's the best
yeah.
dad. So it's a cool story.
Well, you've mentioned the hospital a few times, and I
Yeah.
know the backstory, but walk us through your journey with having Sledge at 26 weeks and kind of like
Yeah.
what that looked like. I remember following along like every week, like the updates and
Yeah.
just like, is he okay? What's going to happen? They can take him
Mm,
home. They're back in the hospital. Like, I know that was such, a trying time for y'all.
yeah.
And walk us through kind of that story.
Yeah. Well, let me first say thank you because I didn't even really mean to share, I guess, about his
Yeah.
life and him arriving. And now I just so see the Lord was inviting a lot of people to
Mhm.
see the power of God's army. I mean, it was
Yeah.
a real treat to be on the receiving end of that. Will and I say that the prayers felt like if you were in a pool and there was an option to drown, but literally every hour somebody gave you a different raft and said, use this.
Mm.
Like, we felt literal people carrying
Yeah.
us. And I mean, so when I say I'll pray for you, I'm like, first off, I'm going to write it down so I'll forget because,
Mm.
just mom brain all the
Yep.
time. And, but I'm going to do it right then
Mhm.
because I so believe, like, It's effective. It's highly
Yeah.
effective. It's the most effective strategy we have. So, but yeah, I went to the doctor for my glucose screening, drank that disgusting stuff,
Yep.
passed it. Yay, who cares? I went to the hospital and they were like, okay, well, obviously, when I asked for an ultrasound, so it was pretty crazy. The weekend before he came, we were at the beach and I had a really weird dream. And I mean, I have weird dreams anyway. And when you're pregnant, they're just like,
Wild.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah, like what are you on? And you're questioning yourself a little bit.
Right.
And so I woke up and I'm like kind of like tapering it, but also this felt a little bit more important. And so I told Will, I was like, gosh, I kind of want to go to like the doctor down here. I just feel like something's up and I can't explain it. And he was like, well, you have an appointment Friday, just like add an ultrasound. So I did. I called, I added an ultrasound, and he had been measuring 2 weeks ahead. So everything was going great. There was no like fear of something might go awry. And then went for the glucose screening. The ultrasound tech started doing the ultrasound, and her eyes. I mean, you can always tell in someone's
Mhm.
eyes, there's a level. She was obviously trying to be professional, but just looked at me and I was like, what's wrong? And she said, I'm going to go get the doctor. And that was the only appointment that Will had not gone to. He had court in another county. So he's an hour and a half away. And he's usually like Johnny on the spot, right
Right.
there. And so my doctor was like, where's Will? Where's your parents? She's like, he's going to be coming. You're going to probably have this baby in less than 100 hours. And so the hospital's right across the street from my OB. And so she said, I'm going to get your parents to come pick you up. She called Will, and at that point, it was just kind of like time is of the essence. So he,
Mhm.
of course, like pretty sure flew back in a car, and I went to the hospital. They said, okay, well, we're going to monitor him. Um, he's going to come in probably like 96 hours. We're going to give you some meds, try and get some of like the sulfactant for his lungs because 26 weeks he had not had a chance to develop that himself, and that's
Mhm.
really important respiratory wise. Um, and then it pretty much went from okay, maybe actually 48. Okay, wait, 24. You're actually going to go into surgery right now, and it was just really, really, really rapid.
Mhm.
Um, and weirdly, Will said when he got there, I was like, because you kind of think you're one way, but have you ever had the experience where you're like, I was so calm, and people are like, for okay, appreciate you thinking that, but you were not. So I was kind of like, okay, shoot me straight. Like I I felt very at peace. Like, was I? And he was like, yeah, when I walked into the room, that was the only thing that kept me from just literally melting on the floor. Was like, you're like, hey, like, what's up? And not because I was like, oh, I am so strong in faith. It just was like, okay, I have one option. I can
Yeah.
either stress sledge out by freaking out, or I can control my temper. I can understand that, like, I have literally zero control. The only thing I can give is a relative sense of calm
Mhm.
and peace and trust, and know that this is not shocking to God.
Right.
And so, was I like going through verses in my head? Well, I mean, I was actually just kind of like, yes, I was, but I was also, like I said, I wasn't super shocked in the same moment. I was shocked and I was also not. I don't know. I
Right.
kind of felt like I was just being readied. And that this was Sledge's story. My brother said it really well. He's like, he was either going to come or he was coming this way. This was always his story.
Right.
So you have one choice. You embrace it. Like that, this is it.
Absolutely.
And so anyway, when they saw him on the ultrasound, they're like, there's fluid all around his organs, all around his brain. He has high drops. This is not looking good. My friend who was in there, anesthesia nurse anesthetist, and she was like, this, afraid also. There was just a lot of like, this situation is not looking promising, pretty
Mhm.
much. And he was born, and there was like a small army in that room. And I mean, I looked over, I hope this is okay to say, and I can still remember the respiratory therapist shoes because there was a massive angel wing that literally covered his isolette, and I have chills right now, and went across the entire floor and was wrapped around the RT's foot.
Wow.
And I was like I was kind of like, is everybody aware of like what's going on right now?
Right.
Like, oh my gosh. And as he was born, I was literally saying body parts out loud I didn't know my mouth was moving. So it's like such a crazy thing to look back on. But as soon as he was born, the whole team they were like, no high drops, and everybody cheered. And I mean, it was like miraculous. They
Yeah.
successfully intubated him. And then we were in the NICU for 120 days.
Yeah.
And, um, I mean, I don't think people understand really, how can you, right? I mean, we don't know what it's like to be in the NICU. A lot of people don't
Right.
even know what the NICU is.
Right.
And really, until I had one of my best friends, her son was in the NICU, and I went to visit him. It was crazy. It was in that same hospital, same situation, like not same situation, but I'd only been on the I'll pray for you end of this,
Right.
not the please God pray for Sledge, please.
Mhm.
So it was that flip that I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like,
Yeah.
we're walking through this, and this is not going to be short lived. And um, it was crazy though. I felt like the Lord was so obvious all around me.
Mhm.
Like, I was going to almost have to work to be afraid. Does that make sense? Like, it was kind of like, I know you want to take him home. Like, I would have moments, of course, where, um, I remember being in postpartum, and the nurse came in, and the cries were, I was like, what is that? And they were like, that's, they're with their baby, and I'm like, oh, like, Sledge isn't in here. Like, we're
Yeah.
going to the NICU. Like, just these weird moments where you just kind of like forget normal.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was a first time mom. I didn't
Right.
have a previous situation, you know? So I say Sledge now. I'm like, there are people like, how many kids do you have? I'm like, three, one, three. It's like,
You're like,
Sledge,
yeah.
yeah, Sledge has been three kids. I don't even know. Um, but it's cool. That process was, of course, trying, in the sense of, I really think so much of it was just, I tend to try and sign up for a lot and overcommit. And my heart's desire really is that, like, I would show up and give, um, and sometimes to a harmful extent, but
Mhm.
that's kind of and I realized my capacity. Like, I had a season that really said, look, this is where you're at.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a choice, and running a business during that time. I mean, everything I wrote was real time. I was in the
Yeah.
hospital, pumping and with Sledge, and
Yeah.
um but it felt important. It just, I think a lot of times when we're in the midst of it, even when you asking me, like, how did you feel looking back when I started Cleerely Stated, sometimes remembering, like, really, how did I feel? Like, was I
Yeah.
scared? I think looking when I was in the hospital, I thought, now is when you're going to be honest. Now is when it's raw. Now is when you feel lonely. Now is when you're wondering, am I doing enough? I mean,
Mhm.
that was always the line of, okay, being proactive, and then trust. Where is that level of, am I being complacent, or am I trying to white knuckle this situation? And continually asking for discernment.
Right.
Um, just being a mom, not trying to be a nurse, not trying to understand more than I needed to understand. But I don't know, like Will and I's marriage, even. I mean, it was like, look, we might feel like we are ships passing in the night in moments, and we may disagree about certain things. We have the same goal here. We are both tired. We are both committed. This is where we're at. We're going to have to
Right.
find a way to operate that we see Sledge and we also see each other,
Yeah.
because I think really easily you just become so tunnel focused. And I think it's so important to just, take a second. I mean, we had the community that, like, showed up, and our friends. I mean, I was so blown away. I mean, you just feel like you're in a continual state of, like, I don't deserve this. And even
Yeah.
now, like, being Sledge's mom and seeing, like, I really felt like the Lord said, okay, Cleere, I want you to think about the truth that, like, I've shared with you and what you write about and all of that. I want you for a minute, just like, put your pad down. I want you to walk upstairs, and I want you to sit. I'm going to give you a special seat, and I'm going to let you see miracles, like, really, really intentionally.
Yeah.
And then I want you to live, and I don't want you to forget it. And that's how it felt.
Yeah.
And So I like Will and I will have moments where we get stressed out now, even with, Sledge is almost 2. He's not crawling or walking. He's getting stronger. He really, really wants to walk. He's taken some steps at, like,
Mhm.
with a lot of assistance, but very much on his own timeline and sorting through all of that. And we'll look at each other and just be like hospital mindset. Because if we can keep that mindset that we had when we were in the hospital in our everyday now, we God's got
You
us.
can do it.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting and crazy because these hard things, if you are a team with your spouse, like you
Yeah.
can get through anything,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
and I feel like your story or just the hardship, you experience that. And then God is going to use your story for like to help somebody else out.
Yes.
We have we did IVF to get pregnant with Collins, and the moment we're like, why is this happening to us? Like
Yeah.
everybody around us has no problems. This isn't fair. It was very hard on us, but like we both look back and we were like, that whole situation strengthened our
Yes.
relationship. Like
Yes.
we are better together because of that. And by sharing or just like talking about it, it's helped so many other people like not feel alone. So I
Mhm.
know others relate to your story and like
And what you were saying with that, like, I remember even when you were sharing, even post just about some things, learning to even from a marriage standpoint is
mhm.
like you said, like, you have to fight for that unity.
Yeah,
But
you
when
really do.
yeah, I mean, especially too, like, I feel like, and maybe this is just Will and I, but he's very black and white. I'm love really gray. I'm I feel like I'm like, well, maybe this. Well, what about this? I feel like there's so many, and he's that. So when it came to like medical jargon, or away from moving forward, or like with y'all's situation, thinking about, okay, how do we need to attack this?
Mhm.
And then also, I think it's hard because as females, we're the one kind of where our bodies are carrying it a little more,
Yeah,
and you're like, okay, I can't punish you because you're not the one walking through this in the physical sense. Because I know that physically it kills you that you're seeing me walk through it physically.
right.
But almost wanting to, like, there are moments where I was like, look, I'm gonna need you to sit down. I'm about to tell you everything I did today. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you feel like, do you see me? And I think both people, it's kind of like marriage. I feel like a lot in hard seasons, especially, is both people fighting to be seen and fighting
Yeah,
to be heard.
right,
And I like when Will, he doesn't have to agree with me. That's really not even what I'm after. I just need to know he sees me.
right,
So it's like sitting
right,
down and being like, hey, tell me what's going on in your heart. I'm like, oh my God, that's all I was after. Okay, thank
right,
you. Okay,
right.
now I can hear you, you know?
Yeah.
Now I can put my pride down. But until then, I'm fighting tooth and nail.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
you just mentioned a second ago just about how God like wanted you to sit down and like look at some of these miracles, and that reminded me of your miracle or your Monday miracle posts.
Oh
So where did those come from? Is
yeah. So the Monday prayers,
yeah.
are you saying? Yeah. I I feel like for the longest time when I was in college, there was a guy who had started a organization called the Monday Life, and he was just always talking about how people dread Mondays,
Right.
and he does stuff for children's hospitals. It's funny now because like looking back at those different dots, but I just feel like we always give that like we live for the weekends, we dread Mondays, Monday blues, all this stuff. And I thought, okay, I have one, like, if I enter, this is a marathon this week. And if
Right.
I enter and I am dreading what's ahead, I'm really not going to steward it well.
Right.
So it was kind of like and this is true, this is backed by science and psychology, like what you hear your own voice speak, there is such a change. Like you don't have to feel it yet. Like our feelings, oh my gosh, they are just not reliable. Sometimes they need to be kicked to the curb. I'm not
I
saying they're not
know.
worth hearing out, but it's like, okay, you don't know. You're
Right.
so offended right now. You're so affected. You're so worried. You're so in the thick of the trees. I need you to just, I'm going to coach you and I'm going to remind you. It's like if you're a bunch of little like ants, I'm going to remind you where to, like, I'm going to tell you where to go.
Right.
And I think that's with spiritual maturity is understanding you have authority over that. And
Yeah.
so really speaking life over your family, declaring like, okay, whatever Goliath shows up, I'm aware of the stones in my pocket. I may not feel it in the moment, but I've been ready for this position.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to remind myself, I always say, I don't want to build more self confidence. I used to think that was what I needed. And then I'm like, what I need is I need more trust in who God is. Because if I trust who God is and He's my safety net, then I can totally hit my face on the floor and He's got me.
Right.
So like just rehearsing the character of God. Um, and that's kind of really, meant to just be like okay, it's like David in the Psalms where he's lamenting, he's struggling. I mean, he's so honest. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, David, I love you. You're so like, I'm like, oh my God, I see bipolar. Okay, I'm really into this. Like, he's very much all over the place, because we can start one morning like really struggling and then sit with Jesus or declare those, be reminded of truth, and then you're okay. I feel centered again, you know. Um, and so this really were just meant to be declarations over what's coming up, over our lives, over who God is, and reminding your soul of what's true. Hey.
Okay.
The Monday, yes. So the Monday prayers, which, kind of like we were saying earlier, I feel like a lot of times you start doing something or create content or whatever just out of your own need, or I think this might be a good idea, and then you hear how it resonates with others and, oh my gosh, I needed that. Or, I felt like Mondays are always tabbed as like, ugh, like I don't want to deal with Monday, or I'm just trying to get through Monday. I'm just trying to get to Friday, or I'm living for the weekend, and I'm like, oh my gosh, 5 days. I really don't want to start off. And the first leg of the race, I'm dreading everything that's coming up, and so it just
Right.
felt like, okay, if I can really rehearse, what does God say about this? Like, who is He? Because whatever I come up against, He's going to be with me. And so if I can remind myself of His character and I can keep that top of mind, then that'll be my guidance. That'll allow me for my feet to feel planted, irregardless of whatever I'm going through, whatever I'm going on. That'll give me the courage I need, the confidence I need, just recentering and recalibrating your mind. So those were really just about like speaking it over your life and your
Yeah.
mindset. Because I think we just have spiritual amnesia. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
we saw God work that miracle in the past. We saw Him take care of it. We saw Him provide. We saw Him do all this stuff, and then we forget. And so it was just like, hey, this is a discipline, and literally reminding myself, hearing my own voice say, like anchoring myself in Scripture and in truth, and kind of starting off the week that way, and refusing to hate Mondays. I'm like, this is a fresh
Yeah.
start, like literally like snow on the ground. Like, this is good. And so that was just kind of became a discipline, and then people, I say it's reframing Mondays, and so it just kind of became a thing. I don't know. It's
I
so
love it.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I always like in the morning on Mondays when I'm scrolling, I'm like, okay. And I love how it's like kind of written out, it just
Yes.
looks like, oh, this is like thoughts that you can take with
Yes.
you,
Yes.
so I feel like it's very relatable.
Yes. I remember being in the hospital. So I had Sledge on a Friday, and I don't know if I think I was still on medicine. I'd had a C-section, obviously. And Will's like, are you writing the Monday prayer? I was like, yeah, I am.
you're, you're like, yeah, this is just, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Really hoping it makes sense. If not, the Lord will cover the gaps. So very much real time. So yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I have one last question, and
Yeah.
I feel like this is going to be a really good one. I can't wait to hear your answer. But what would you tell a girl listening to this that is trying to figure out what their purpose is and isn't quite sure if she's getting it right?
I would say, do you want to get coffee? Same.
Right? You're not alone.
You're not alone. I think what's really hard about, I think it's wonderful that we want to honor God and follow His voice. I think we make it very complicated.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times we think there's just like this very ironed out plan and one way to go and a burning bush, and we haven't heard Him or we haven't seen it, or is this going to make sense? And I always say, like, is it out of your comfort zone? Does it align with Scripture? Does it please God? Probably the right step to take. I think with purpose, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of our purpose is
anchoring ourselves in Jesus and then sharing that love, right? Being a disciple, talking about what he's doing, believing that he is who he says he is, and then living out of that, So that purpose can literally look a million different ways. And I think right now culture is very much like, there's purpose and there's calling, and am I missing it? Am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right season? And it's almost like this language in Christianese, and I fall into it too, where I'm like, am I walking in purpose? And I think sometimes growth is not linear. And I think that's what's really hard is like we think purpose is going to be like a masterful plan, or it's going to make a whole bunch of sense and we'll know the next step, and it'll line up, and it'll impress other people. I think a lot of times we really have to take a step back and say, am I concerned about purpose because I want to manage perception, or am I concerned about purpose because I want to please the Father? Two very different ways that we are walking, right? Because if I'm trying to please God and I know I'm holding his hand, he knows I'm confused, I only know the stair step, that's probably the point. If I'm trying to manage a perception that I have it together, that what I'm doing is impressive, that any of that, I'm going to get really caught up in how it looks. And that's usually when you trip, right? Like when you're looking all around and your feet stumble is usually because you were trying to manage a reputation more than you were like, okay, I just want to honor. Where do you have me? What does this look like? And to be honest, I think a lot of times our purpose is not our preference, which kind of sucks. I mean, that's just honest. Like when you're walking through stuff, but not even that. Like when your hand is to the plow and you were like, okay, Lord, let's be real. She's had her harvest. She's had her harvest, and things are looking bare around here. Like, what is up with that? Right. And he's like, hey, look, you don't understand that where you are at is actually like it feels mundane, but people are taking note that your hand is still to the plow, that you are doing things with excellence, that you are trusting me, that you still choose joy despite the fact that the weather's the same and the view is the same and you're tired of it. Like, I just wonder how much we want an impressive life instead of a quiet life that honors him, and how I think really purpose is getting back to the root of, I just want to do what expands heaven, and I want to do it in a way that brings me peace. Right. And that comes to fruition a million different ways, Yeah. So I don't know if that any really even makes sense. I would say maybe my bottom line is take heart, he connects the dots in ways you would never guess. Right. And he wastes nothing, and so many times the detour that we pray against offers the refinement we pray for. So, I want to be a person of faith. I want to have courage. I want to be whatever. I want to be a woman who honors God. I want to be a wife who this and that. It's like, okay, well, this detour was the only way your stubborn mind was going to get a hold of that, And so, like, looking back, if I didn't have those, oh God bless, that would be bad. I needed those. Like it's not, who prays for, oh, I want to walk through the fire, but man, that's when you get it. That's when the lesson becomes the fabric of who you are, because you had to hold on to it. So, but God cultivates purpose where we are, I mean, he's doing so much. We're so short-sighted. We can only see so little. And I just think if we're being a student of him and we're sitting down and we're asking to learn more about his heart, our eyes are open to the people around us, he's not going to lead us in a way that wastes our life. Right. I just think we have to be okay with the fact that we won't get to know more than we're supposed to know. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's hard too, because we're human and we're like comparing ourselves to others. We want to know right when we want to know. And so sometimes like in that season of waiting or figuring it out, that can feel like I'm not doing something right. Yes. And it's like, no, this is like where I have you right now. Let's just accept that.
Or that knowing is responsible. Like if you know you're a responsible person, if you know, then you're a proactive person. If you know you're a determined person. Well, and God's economy is so different, right? If you don't know and you trust, you're a faithful person, right? If you don't know and you lean in, you're a dependent person. Like it's when you don't know that you actually have to have faith, right? It's so crazy. Like we want to have this and we want to know exactly that these meet, but only the gap is the faith gap. Like there's no way you can trust that this will hold you if this is right here. But if this is separated, then there is that possibility where your faith actually gets to be challenged. So it's that active faith that we want requires the challenge and the not knowing, the uncertainty, you know? Also, if we knew, we would never sign up for stuff. We're just, are you kidding me? I would be like, true. Not me. God, I'm not your girl. I so appreciate it. Like I think about Joseph or I think about Noah, like never rain. Can you imagine?
Yes. I actually, it's funny you say that. I was reading about Noah this morning and I was just like, just re-listening to the like actual Bible verses on the story. I'm like, wow, that is some trust.
Yes. Like we're not talking about a paddle boat. We are talking about a massive ship and like years being built.
So specific too. I mean, I think it's so cool. Like all the details are right there in the Bible and literally he followed all of the directions and it's just the story is like the trust needed for that, which I'm sure he was like, this sounds crazy.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, I don't think it was like, oh, you're void of being human while you're following God. I mean, I think half the time, like, don't get it wrong. Like, just because I was obedient, I mean, I was like, Lord, I am kicking and screaming. Like, this is confusing. You're going to have to clarify. I'm trusting you. This is insane. It's like, you know, a child where I'm like,
it's
I'm still holding on to your hand, but I am really trying not to go down this aisle. You know?
Right.
And I think he's good with that though. You know? I mean, I don't, he's our father. Like he's not surprised by when our heart like struggles or rejects or is confused and wants to know more. You know? He just wants to be the place that we go instead of resorting to everything else because he knows he's the only one who can say, hey, look, if you just sit with me, then we'll get like, you will find the peace you're craving. And so that's why I just think so many times a lot of like the enemy of our lives is really just the hurry that we experience because we just don't stop long enough to realize that we're not after the thing we think we're after. We're just after God, but we're running really quick. And sometimes he just wants us to walk and chill out a little bit. So.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
Well, Cleere, this conversation and interview has been so amazing. I feel like it's been exactly what I've needed. I know it's going to touch the lives of some of our listeners and followers. Will you please tell us where we can continue following along with you for those who might not know how to get in touch with you?
Yes. Well, I know everyone always says, I'm so honored to be on your podcast, but I've told you this. In fairness, I wrote you messages years ago that you could read. And no, I'm not just blowing smoke. The way you're walking is impacting so many lives. And I'm so proud of you as like a person in this. I'm like such a crier, so I'm just not even going there. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful for how you steward your platform because I know that sometimes it means closing doors and sometimes it means opening ones, and you trusting God with those is really cool. And I know that I know he's proud of you. So that's really,
thank you.
It's encouraging to see that. But yes, Cleerely Stated is, so my name is Cleere. People always are like, hi, Cleerely. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not.
It's just Cleere.
It's just Cleere. You know, probably like, do people?
Well, people think my name is Loverly, so I get that.
Yeah. And you're like, no, okay, I shot myself in the foot, whatever. Yep, I'm Cleerely. Nice to meet you. You know, if you'll buy the scripture cards, I'll be Cleerely at Panera.
Exactly.
I don't even care. You know. But Cleerely Stated on Instagram and cleerlystated.com is the website. Just lots of encouraging gifts. You know, I always say that everything really is like each product that I write it to a person. So, you know, the men's product, like I wrote one of them is to my brother. The first one was to my dad. The recent one is to Will. So I always have someone in mind. So I always say that, you know, if one person needs it, a lot of people might. So, but just, hopefully really my goal is always that if I could have a superpower, that I would have the eyes of Jesus, because if I can see myself and everyone else in the world around me as he saw it, then I really don't need anything else, because I'll know what to touch. I'll know what to do. I'll know what's important. And so that's the point of every product, is just to help all of us have more eyes that are like his. So,
well, I appreciate this so much. Thank you. Thank you. It's truly been a joy.
You're a treat to me and so many others. And I'm so grateful. Seriously, thank you for having me on. And look forward to talking soon.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany.